in this project, we are going to use Bootstrap theme from Bootswatch. And also we are going to use BEM to create our markup. If you remember from the section 3, we have learned BEM. It's a naming convention to name your classes inside of your HTML markup. And it's a very easy way to reuse your chunks of code. And you can actually understand your CSS classes and know what they are, but just by looking at your CSS sheet. So BEM is very helpful, very useful, and it will help us a lot in this project. And I want to say that I have already coded this project. I will not live code because it's very simple. Basically, I just took bunch of components and put them on one page. So nothing too complicated, but I want to give you a feel how to create your project with Bootstrap themes and how to implement those themes into your project. And you can certainly follow along with me, and you can certainly create your own project, pick your own theme from Bootswatch, and create your own single product page or whatever page you want to create. So without much further ado, let's go get started. Let me show you the project itself. So this is the project. So I have a navbar and I have this section with an image and some text and a button and a price. Then I have a similar products page and a little footer, and that's it for the whole page. So there's nothing more to it, but you can see that it's not a regular Bootstrap. It has some sort of a sketchy vibe, and that's because I'm using Bootstrap Bootswatch theme. And if we go to this website, bootswatch.com, and scroll down, the theme I'm using is this sketchy theme. And if you want to use any of these themes, you need to download 2 files depending on the theme you want to use. And the files that you want to download is variables and Bootswatch. So if you decided to use something else, for example, the superhero, then you need to download these variables and Bootswatch according to this theme. And if you hit this preview, you will get to this page. And basically it shows you the options that you have with this theme and what you can do with it. So there's a lot of things that you can do. There's some drawbacks that I will talk about in our next video. And so yeah, this is the project that I am going to go over thoroughly. I'm going to explain everything, how I did it and why I decided to go in such a direction. And hopefully it's going to be fun for you and you're going to learn something useful from going through this project. And again, this is not live coding, so it's going to be pretty fast, pretty quick, and pretty intuitive. So in this video, let's talk about the markup. And as you can see, I have a couple of sections over here. The first section is the header that has the navigation or the navbar with the menu and the search bar and the drop down item. And then we have the main section with the image, the text, table, price, and a form. And below that, there's a similar product that I used cards to create, and also I have used stretched link to make this a button. So whenever I hover over, I can click on this link, and I don't necessarily have to hover over the button to click the link. And then the last section is the footer. So now let's get over to our text editor. And first off, I want to talk about the theme that I have been using and how I have implemented. First off, we have 2 files. There is a sketchy variables that has all of the variables that we need for the theme. Basically, it's just some random colors, and font family is different. So there's Cabin Sketch in Naucha from Google Fonts. And then just regular variables. I have not drilled deep into them, so I don't really know what they're doing and what they're changing, but we have those variables, so we are gonna use them. And the other file is Bootswatch, and Bootswatch is an override of components. This part I have added myself. For some reason, the fonts would not be applied to paragraph, so I've added this Naucha font to entirety of the body. And whenever we have a heading, for example, if we scroll over here and go to font family, we have heading font family, tab and sketch, that is being applied as well to the heading elements. But this wasn't being applied, so I have customized this Bootswatch a bit. And also there is a lot of overrides of Bootstrap components. So keep that in mind, that Bootswatch will override your Bootstrap components, and you need to place it after all of your components. So just like I did with my index.css, here I have my sketchy variables after my initial variables. So this new variables partials could override these variables, and right at the bottom I have Bootswatch, so that Bootswatch can override all of these components that I'm using. So that's how to implement a theme from Bootswatch page into your project. If you like, if you want to have a stock Bootstrap, you can definitely do that. But stock Bootstrap, as I mentioned in one of the first sections, is pretty ugly UI, and you might want to style it in your own way. And Bootswatch gives a lot of options that you can use to style the Bootstrap. If we head over to index.html, should be at the very bottom, I want to just go over the markup that I have. How I have structured my markup. First of all, I have this header tag with class of container, and within that header tag I have a navbar. And if we look at the page, my navbar is within the container. If I take out that container, the navbar is going to be stretched full width of the viewport. So keep that in mind if you want your navbar to be constrained inside of the container. Put a container outside of the navbar, or the navbar inside of the container. And that's how I did my header with header class. And there's nothing too fancy about header. I have not really edited anything from this markup except for I put my own link items and changed some of the text over here, but nothing as for the markup or the classes or attributes. I have not changed any of that from the markup from the Bootstrap documentation. And next we have the main content. I have used a main tag for the main content. Again, it's inside of the container. And then I have a single product section, and single product section actually consists of a couple of sections, or a couple of components, I should say. So this is single product section over here, and I have an image, I have some heading, paragraph, table, price, and a form, and all of that is inside of this single product. And the main container, or the main tag, is all of this content. So it includes the main content and the similar product, or the single product and the similar product. So that's all the main content. So I have the header, the main content, and the footer. And the main content, which is a main tag, consists of these two components. So back to the text editor, I have used BEM to style my markup. And so I have this single product img, which means this image belongs to a single product component, and this is my class single product. Then I have single product data over here, and then I have single product data title, single product data about, and single product data table. So all of my classes is very organized, and if I want to style any of this content, I know how to do that, and I know exactly which class is going to do that. And then we have single product data price and single product data form, and that's about it for the single product. And if we scroll down on the sidebar and go into partials, I have a couple of partials, and I want to stress out the importance of like having a component inside of one partial. So if you, for example, are making a markup that has one component, make sure it has only one partial. So don't have 3 or 4 components inside of the one file. Have a separate file for every component that you are creating. And over here, if we go to single product, this is all of my markup. Basically, I just added some spacing. And if you remember, we have created this function that will turn pixels into ems, and our function lives in this function CSS inside of the utils folder. And also we are using this base pixels variable to work with our function. So our sizing over here will not be in pixels, but will be in ems. And we can test that. Let me first check. So for example, we can check this on table or this padding bottom for the single product. So if we go ahead and inspect our single product, and padding bottom is 2.1875 m, so our function is working properly. Also, for this markup or for the styles, I have border radius, and I'm using this variable, and that variable comes from, I believe, Bootstrap. Yes, we have a Bootstrap, and we have this variable, so we can use border radius sketchy, LG sketchy, or SM sketchy, and I have used just the regular border sketchy. So that's where my variable comes from. And back to single product, and I just want to stress out the BEM naming convention. Basically, I have the single product, and then I'm using this parent identifier to select the single product dash image to set the styles on it, and then single product dash data. And inside of data, I have table, prices, and form, but I'm not selecting form because I don't need no styles on that as of yet. So I am just doing another parent inside of the data. So this markup or CSS styles are nested 2 times. So this is the first time, and this is the second time. And you can easily style that all with BEM. So keep in mind the benefits of using BEM, and just by looking at this CSS code, you can know what is going on. You can know that this is all one component, and that this data has to do with this single product data, or this table has to do with this data, and that data has to do with this single product. So it's very easy, very intuitive to understand BEM naming convention and to actually read CSS styles and know what they're doing and how they are interacting with the markup on the web page. And again, I just want to point out the importance of not relying too much on utilities. I could have used utilities for the spacing, but I have decided just to use a simple code to add my spaces, because spacing utilities are very easy. They're not very difficult, and you can definitely code them yourself. So don't rely too much on utilities. Use only utilities that do require a lot of coding, and you can fix that with just putting one class inside of your markup. But if something like this, spacing, just go ahead and code it yourself. And for our partials, I want to point out that all of these partials are included inside of my index, this index folder. So I have the global, and then the header, single products, similar products, and the footer. And all of this is included inside of this index, no, this main.css. So I'm grabbing the index from the partials. So all of my newly created partials are included into compiled CSS. And if we head back over to the index.html, I just want to point out my next section, which is similar products, which is pretty simple. I'm using card deck, and I just want to point out the card deck and what it does. So if I will go ahead and copy this markup and paste in one more card, now I will have 3 cards lined out. So that's the card deck, and that's what it's doing. So it's like making a card deck out of your cards. And I will go ahead and remove that. And I'm using free pick photos, and also for this button I have stretched links, so all of my card is essentially a button. And for the footer, I have a pretty simple footer with a footer container, and then I have footer title, and then I have a small text, and that I got where I got those images. And if we look at similar products, it's pretty simple, just a couple of spaces. But for the footer, I am setting the background color to this color and adding some padding. And if we look at the footer, this is where I am setting the background color to this tag, not the footer container, but actually to this tag. And then I am doing my footer markup. So the main takeaway from this video: make sure to structure your CSS. Make sure to have one component per one partial. Don't have one partial for like a lot of components. And if you will end up with a lot of partials, you can certainly create folders and organize your partials in that fashion. But don't create like one partial and have like all of your components inside of that partial, and it's gonna take you a heck of a long time to find that CSS code. So in my case, I know exactly where my CSS code is and in which file. And so if I need to change footer styles, I can go ahead and grab this footer partial and edit that footer partial. So having said that, I will wrap up this video, and in our next video we are gonna talk about how to improve our loading speed of this website, because we are not using all of the components that we are adding. So if you look down in the index from the Bootstrap folder, we have a lot of the components, and we are not using all of the components. Same goes with JavaScript. So we're gonna take our project and skim it, make it lighter, and test how light it is. Okay, so first off, we have this project that I have opened inside of the file manager. And if we go into CSS folder, we have this main.css, and go to properties, we have 189 kilobytes. Now if we go to JavaScript and go to JavaScript min.js, we have 179 kilobytes. And if we head over to our web page, and I'll show you one nice trick. If we inspect the page, go to network, start recording, make sure this is in red, and then we reload the page. And if your all is selected, make sure to select whatever you want to look at. And in our case, I want to look at JavaScript, and we have 221 bytes for JavaScript. And for CSS, we have, oops, where is my CSS? Something is now working right. There we go. There's my CSS. We have 221 bytes. And as you remember, our CSS was not 221 bytes. It was 189 kilobytes. So this version of CSS is a lot smaller because it is caged. And to remove the cage and to see how big our CSS is and how it will affect the load speed of the web page, you can do this disable cache option, or I have a plugin that will clear the cache and reload the website. So you can obviously do it with this, but I'm gonna do it with my Google Chrome plugin. And over here we have 185 kilobytes, and it's loaded in 7 milliseconds, which is pretty good, but we are gonna shrink it down a little bit just because we have a lot of CSS that we are not using. And for JavaScript, let's reload that, and 175 kilobytes, so everything is back to normal. So what we are going to do, I'm gonna go to our text editor and shrink our compiled JavaScript and CSS to even smaller size. And that size is pretty good, like 200 kilobytes is a good size for a CSS or JavaScript of your website, but nonetheless, we are gonna shrink it even more. And if we look at our index.css, which is inside of the Bootstrap folder, we have a lot of components that we are not using. Same goes for our gulp file. If we head over to the gulp file, we have a lot of components over here that we are not using. So we are going to remove all of those components that we are not using and just gonna have the components that we are using. And I will not live do that. I will actually pause the video, do that, and then I'll show you the end result. So I have removed the components from Sass and JavaScript that we are not using. And first off, I want to show you that everything works fine. Everything is working properly, the menu and the rest of the web page. So our web page essentially looks the same, but everything is a lot smaller in size. So if we go back to text editor and to index.css, which is inside of the Bootstrap folder, we can see that I have commented out a lot of components. So essentially we have type, tables, buttons, drop down. Drop down is for the menu option, card, transition, forms, and navbar. This transition is for the menu to collapse and uncollapse. And basically, if we go ahead and inspect this, and if I would not have transition, then the menu would be in this way and would not be collapsed. So transition is important. Keep that in mind. If you use navbar, you need transition. And this is it for the CSS. So our CSS should be a lot lighter. And if we head to CSS section folder, we have 134 kilobytes. So over here, 134, a lot less than we had before. Not too much of an improvement, but there is an improvement. And for the JavaScript, we need to go to gulp_file.js. And I have removed tab, carousel, modal, scroll, spy, tooltips, popovers, and toast. But I still need popper.js and utility.js for the dropdown. Now, so we have the button.js and collapse.js, which I think we don't need the button.js because we are not using any fancy JavaScript buttons. And let's go back into the terminal, do gulp scripts, wait for that to complete, and now run gulp. And everything works fine. All of our buttons look great. And if we go ahead and inspect the page, go to network, and I'm still recording. Let's redo that and refresh the page. And we can see if we go to CSS, I have 131 kilobytes. And if I go to JavaScript, I have 125 kilobytes. So we have reduced about 100 kilobytes, which is not a lot, but if you take in account that some users could be on their cell phones with 2G coverage, and we can actually test that. If we go to localhost 3001, go to network throttle and go to regular 2G and create a server for 2G, and then let's just open it up. and we can see that it takes some time to load our simple web page. And shrinking that extra kilobytes is very important when you are creating a web page for mobile users. So keep in mind that extra kilobytes will end up in extra waiting time for the user. So if you don't need components inside of your Bootstrap, don't use them, get rid of them, but make sure everything is working. So this is it for this section. I hope you enjoyed it and learned a couple of new things. And the main takeaway from this section is how to structure the web page with all the proper tags and how to use BEM. I know we have learned BEM a while back ago in section 3, I guess. And the last important thing that I want to point out is don't use Bootstrap components if you don't need them. Make sure to have just the JavaScript and just the CSS that is being used on your web page.